meeting before the end of the year. As I speak to you now for the second consecutive day and for the first time in many, many years, the leaders of the legitimate government of Lebanon and leaders from the government of Israel are seated at the State Department for the second day in a row, and hopefully today we'll produce a joint statement and an action plan on a track for security in that country, independent from Hezbollah, independent from nefarious influence. They had similar meetings last week at the Pentagon at the military level. We have signed 32 health compacts. 32 countries have signed health compacts with the United States, where our aid to those countries will not just be dollars distributed to an NGO who then will go into the country and impose programs. Instead, we are partnering with 32 countries, many of them in the African continent, in which we will empower their native and domestic health industries and national health systems so that they can not only are we treating the acute situations on the ground of people that are sick, we are helping them build the capacity and the capability to do this for themselves. This is what these countries want. They do not want to be perpetual aid recipients. They want to be able to take care of their people one day, and we are helping them as part of our aid to build that infrastructure. I could go on, but let me just say another point. We are better today than we have ever been at disaster relief. Today, the United States can respond to disasters around the world on a humanitarian basis faster and more effectively than they ever have because of our reorganization. And the proof is our response in Jamaica, our response to 2 typhoons in the Pacific, our ability to quickly deploy within 24 hours and bring aid directly, coordinating with the governments to people, is better than it has ever been because we cut out bureaucracy, we cut out the middleman, and we went right to the point. We still have challenges. On Sudan, remains a very frustrating situation. We've remained deeply engaged with the Quad in these negotiations. As many of you are aware, unfortunately, Sudan has turned into a proxy war between multiple countries, and the divisions between the UAE and Saudi Arabia have truly complicated our ability to bring that to an end. What we're focused on there now is identifying 2 cities, or 4 cities, 2 on each side, that will serve as points of distribution for humanitarian aid. But the inability, the real frustrating thing about Sudan is that one side or the other will agree to something, but then they will not comply. But we remain focused on that, and we have people that work on that full time. We even had a donor conference just about a month and a half ago where hundreds of millions of dollars in pledges for not just humanitarian aid, but reconstruction. We're focused on that. It's an ongoing challenge. On DRC and Rwanda, they signed a peace agreement. Unfortunately, compliance has not been good. We've had to impose a few sanctions. On the Rwandan side, we are starting to see some compliance. It's moving, not moving fast enough, but we're hoping to see compliance at some point in the middle part of next month in withdrawing the Rwandan troops from there. Of course, we still have the M23 problem that has to be addressed. So this is a host of issues we could go on. Obviously, the ongoing challenges of Iran remain, as I'm sure we'll speak about extensively in your questions today. So I apologize, that took 4 minutes and 55 seconds, but I tried to talk as fast as I could. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Rubio. I now recognize Ranking Member Meeks for 5 minutes of questions.
I'm going to ask you to answer my questions quickly because clearly the chairman wants to protect you. That's why he's cutting me off my opening statement. But Secretary,
you had 5 minutes.
Yeah. Secretary, you have the honor of serving both the acting National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. In these roles, you've played a central role in advising the president as commander-in-chief to launch a war against Iran, and the impacts of this choice have been significant on our allies and partners who immediately have targeted by retaliatory strikes, as well as for Americans here at home. 3 months into this war, gas and food prices are up, inflation is rising, American business owners and farmers are struggling from higher shipping and commodity costs, and yet the president said 2 weeks ago, and I quote, "I don't think about Americans' financial situation." That's a quote that should alarm every American. Americans are also rightfully concerned that while they struggle with affordability due to the war in Iran, the President of the United States is busy day trading on it. He disclosed purchases of stocks in energy and defense companies in the first quarter of this year that were made just as those companies' profits were soaring from the war in Iran. On March 23rd, the same day he reversed his threat to strike Iranian energy, infrastructure, and energy stocks rose. He bought stocks then in Phillips 66, Exxon, and Chevron. Secretary, I have a few questions, and again, given the amount of time that I have, I will ask you to give me yes and no answers. Did you warn President Trump before the war in Iran began that this conflict would drive up costs on gas, food, travel, and shipment?
Yeah, I'll warn you right now, I don't do yes or no answers.
Yeah,
So
well,
these
I
are
only have
complex
5
questions.
minutes. I know when
Well,
you
so
were
do
the
I.
senator, you know
I
about
never
this
did yes or
business,
no answers
and I
to
know
people.
you're trying to go out so that you can run out my 5 minutes. That's a simple
I'm not
question.
gonna run out your 5 minutes. You're running out your 5 minutes.
Did you-
I don't do yes or no question. You want to ask me a question? I'll answer.
I'm
your
answering.
question.
You answer my question. It's my time. Did you?
Did I what?
Yes or no? Did you warn President Trump
The president
before
was
the
fully-
Iran war began that this conflict would drive up costs on gas, food, travel, and shit?
The president,
yes or no?
The president and the full administration was aware that there would be consequences to action, but the consequences of
Let me
Iran
move
having
on.
a nuclear weapon were worse.
Did you warn him? Did you warn him that launching a war in Iran could result in the regime placing a chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz?
All the risk factors were understood, but the most important risk
I
factor
just
was
want to know
Iran
if you did
cannot
your
have a
job.
nuclear
Did you
weapon.
warn him?
Iran
If
cannot
you
have
didn't
a
warn him,
nuclear
say
weapon.
yes. It's simple.
Everyone was aware of what Iran might
Did you
do in
warn him?
retaliation.
I'm asking you a second. Did you
Everyone
warn him?
was aware.
Don't
of
want to
what
answer that. Let
Iran
me ask
would
you the
do.
next question.
But the worst part
Did
is that
you
they
warn
can't
the
have a
president that launching U.S. strikes against Iran would result in retaliatory attacks on U.S. allies, partners, and Americans living or working in the Middle East?
Everyone
Yes
understood
or
what
no?
Iran would do in response.
Did you warn them?
We were prepared for any response that
You
they
warn-
came out with.
Okay.
We knew it.
Just want to make
but
sure.
they can't have a nuclear
So
weapon.
you're saying you warned them? Did you warn the president that the personal stock purchases and companies profiting from the war that he launched could present a conflict of interest?
I'm not aware of the president's stock purchases. I don't deal in that, and I don't even know what you're saying is true.
Well, we know that because it is made public what his stock purchases were.
You say so. I don't read the president's
All right,
the
so-
financial disclosure, but I don't believe that to be true.
Well, I think that the president should be more transparent. Secretary Rubio, because these are basic questions that I'm asking you, and to be transparent with the American people. This is what this is all about, the transparency. So, for example, when you go and look at some of your statements that you made in regards to Cuba, I only have 58 seconds left, and I'd love to get it, but you talked about Gaisa, who's controlling the military and what's taking place there, and that they have the opportunity to benefit while the Cuban people are suffering. So what we're seeing here now, the one person that's benefited from this war by his purchase of stocks, him and his friends, they have made billions of dollars while the American people are suffering. You've accused, and I agree, with reference to some folks, what they're doing in Cuba and how they're making money while people suffer. That's what's taking place in the United States of America. The Trump administration and his friends are making billions of dollars while the American people suffer. And they continue to suffer.
Breaks my
as
heart, but
gas
ranking
prices
member's time
go
has
up.
expired. Representative McCall is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank you for your service. Secretary, I know you're wearing a lot of hats, a lot of responsibilities. I think you're doing an outstanding job. Let me just say, since 1979, a dark veil of terror descended upon the Middle East, and we've had it ever since. And every president since that time has said that a nuclear Iran is not acceptable. And every Congress has said that. In fact, last Congress, when I was chairman of this committee, I passed a resolution that said that a nuclear Iran was unacceptable and that the U.S. must use any means necessary to prevent them from obtaining a nuclear weapon. The vast majority of Democrats voted for this. Almost all Republicans. It passed the House floor, a resolution stating that that is not acceptable. We've had a lot of talk in these Congresses and in prior administrations, a lot of talk, but we haven't had a whole lot of action. Your administration, you, sir, and the president have taken action on this very dire, dangerous situation we find ourselves in with Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. I also want to applaud you for your efforts in this Western Hemisphere. A free Venezuela, a free people, possibly one day a free Cuba. And people don't realize Iran is in this hemisphere, and Russia is in this hemisphere, China is in this hemisphere. This is all kind of tied together in a coherent foreign policy strategy that I see. So I want to give you the time, sir, to respond to that, because again, all talk and no action. But you, sir, have put this into action.
Thank you. Well, let me just, before I address that, the ranking member made accusations against the president, which I've never heard before, but number one, are completely false. Not once, just to be clear, not a single time, not even for a millisecond, has the president ever discussed his personal economics in relations to war or any public policy that he's made for that matter. And I've been in every one of his foreign policy meetings for the most part. As to your point, what we need to understand is exactly what you just said. It's not just that we say they can't have a nuclear weapon. Everyone says they can't have a nuclear weapon. The Chinese say they can't have a nuclear weapon. The Russians agree they couldn't have a nuclear weapon. But at a point, you have to do something about it. What Iran was trying to do was build a conventional shield of drones and missiles and a navy and capabilities. At some point, they would say to the world, now we're going to get a nuclear weapon, and you can't do anything about it because we have so many weapons and so many drones and so many naval vessels that the price we will inflict on you for trying to do something about it makes us untouchable, makes us immune. And the president was not going to allow them to build a conventional shield behind which they can develop their nuclear program. Today, the Iranian Navy sits at the bottom of the sea. They do not have a Navy. It no longer exists. They have no Air Force either. Their missile launchers have been significantly degraded. Their defense industrial base has suffered upwards of 80 to 90% of attrition. It will take years for them to rebuild it. Those are facts. That is the reality. That was the purpose of Epic Fury. It achieved its purpose in degrading that conventional shield. And it has brought them to the negotiation table that hopefully will lead to the point where Iran will give up its enrichment ambitions, will turn over the highly enriched uranium, will stop sponsoring terrorism around the world.
You know, and I think the goal should be the fulfillment of the Abraham Accords. We know why October 7th happened, because Israel and Saudi were getting very, very close, and in Iran's perspective, dangerously close to a normalization agreement. And what did Iran do? They lit up their proxies. They lit up their proxies to stop that from happening. I do foresee a free Iran. I do foresee a free Venezuela and a free Cuba, but you have to start somewhere. And I think we're taking the steps so that future generations will thank us for these actions.
Look, and on the point of, we would love to see a change in Iran and that they be governed by people, but that was not the goal of our mission. The goal of our mission was to take away their ability to threaten the region with an overwhelming number of missiles and drones that would basically make them immune to any sort of external pressure. And then they could break out to a nuclear weapon. That was the goal. It achieved that from a military perspective. The reality of it remains that it's not just us. The entire world says they can't have a nuclear weapon, but no one wanted to do anything about it. And I can tell you this, they are not going to have a nuclear weapons program, at least as long as President Trump is in the White House. That's been made clear to everyone in the administration from the very top down. It was the motivation behind these actions, and it's the reason why we engaged the way we did.
I want to thank you again in the last 10 seconds for your service. I would hope we could unify as a nation behind this. I would hope our allies would unify behind us on this, because they've all said it, as we have said it in the past, and yet it was all talk and no action.
Representative's time has expired. Representative Keating is recognized.
Chairman, for the record, I ask unanimous consent to submit the President's financial disclosure form, which will detail those dealings that were referred to by the ranking member.
Without objection.
Secretary, thank you for being here. In conjunction with your job, you're also the National Security Advisor with access to the most sensitive intelligence secrets our countries and other countries have in the world. But before this, you had these two positions. You had a distinguished career as a member and a chair for 5 years of the Senate Intelligence Committee up to last year. And you and Senator Warner are some of the most respected and knowledgeable people at that time and voices in the entire intelligence community, earning the trust of Democrats and Republicans alike, senator and House members, and other countries. So with all your Intelligence Committee experience, and now as Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, and all those years of experience, have you ever, specifically in the context of the intelligence community, heard the name Bill Pulte?
In the context of intelligence?
That's what I said.
No. No, I have
Never heard his name. Okay, thank you for answering that.
Well,
never even heard his name. Given all your years of experience and your position now, never heard the name. For the record, Bill Pulte is a person Donald Trump has chosen for the acting director of national intelligence with no experience in the intelligence field whose misuse, and widely reported, of confidential information led to the prosecution of the president's political enemies, is now the person in charge of the nation's most closely guarded intelligence when he couldn't even conduct himself appropriately as the federal housing finance director. Now, Secretary, have you ever heard of the name Ira Zahari?
Who's that?
You've never heard the name Ira Zahari?
I mean, it doesn't ring a bell off the top.
In the context of security? Well, let me tell you. Mr. Zahari pleaded guilty for breaking into the Capitol on January 6th through a broken window, wielding a metal rod as a weapon. And Donald Trump appointed him to a team at the Pentagon focused on irregular warfare and, of all things, counterterrorism. That's ironic, given that he participated in one of the most significant incidents of domestic terror in our country's history. I think it's shameful, the people that are being appointed, and I think it's also shameful, some of the people that have been fired. Now, I want to move to Iran, because given your nuclear and intelligence background, which is extensive and appreciated and respected, I'm sure you're aware that Ukraine, the country at the time with the third largest nuclear arsenal, peacefully turned over their nuclear weapons in conjunction with the Budapest Memorandum, and in exchange for the U.S. commitment to defend Ukraine if it ever came under threat. The U.S. gave their word to Ukraine they would defend them. And I found this amazing. In your opening remarks, as you took us all over the world, and you mentioned 15 different incidents where you have interceded. 15, the top 15. Not once did you mention Ukraine when you were prioritizing the achievement that's there. Now let me go on.
Tried to stay under
Let
5
me go
minutes.
on. Oh, you tried to stay, yeah, please.
Well, I
It's
can
not
answer
funny.
that.
It's not funny, Secretary. Now,
What's not funny
in
is
Iran
that-
now,
Well, you don't.
in
this
Iran
is- you
now,
can't even
I
answer
reclaim
questions
my
here.
time. I reclaim my time, Mr. Chairman.
You
He's
guys make
interrupting
these
me.
statements and no one
He
can
is
respond.
interrupting me.
Do something about it.
I'm doing it. I'm asking you to reclaim those seconds back.
No.
Now in Iran, what goes around comes around, Mr. Chairman. Now in Iran, the Trump administration issues a general license to Russia, providing billions in oil profits every month, several billion every month, fueling Putin's war machine. You didn't mention that in your opening remarks. And then this is a war of aggression of Russia attacking Ukraine, to which we gave our agreement. And this is to a country that's assisting us in Iran, Ukraine, and helping a country with a war machine that are aiding Iran against us and putting our service members in jeopardy. Look, we have an opportunity as members just today to vote on the Ukraine Support Act. I hope we do it. And I am confident that we have bipartisan support. But I hope this administration would act on its own. They could do things themselves that you didn't mention, like rescind these general licenses, complete a bilateral drone agreement with Ukraine, provide direct military assistance that has access to Ukraine, implement comprehensive sanctions packages,
Representative
and condemn
Time's expired.
the aggression.
Representative
Thank you,
Smith
Mr.
of New
Chairman,
Jersey
for taking
is
up
recognized.
my time and squandering it. That's not how a chairman should act.
Representative Smith, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, if you need a moment to respond to
Well, I also didn't mention Cuba because I literally handwrote what I was going to say to you guys, and I told you I was going to submit the written for the record, and I think everybody understands Cuba's a priority for me. Just on the Ukraine front, I'll address it now if it's okay with your time that I could do so. I think it's well documented that we've been very involved in trying to get the two sides to the table. We've invested a lot of time in it. Unfortunately, so to this point, neither side has been willing to make concessions, particularly on the Russian side, necessary in order to bring peace about. We remain ready to play any role we can in that context of bringing a peace about, because we think the war in Ukraine, devastating war, has no military solution. It can only be solved through a diplomatic route, and it's been unfruitful. I would characterize it as the ongoing challenges. That said, let's be clear, we are not, to be fair and to be frank, we are not impartial mediators in that war, okay? We don't provide weapons to Russia. We only provide weapons to Ukraine. We don't impose sanctions on Ukraine. We only impose sanctions on Russia. So we have clearly taken a side. We continue to sell weapons to Ukraine, by the way, through the Pearl program, unimpeded by what's happened in the Middle East or anywhere else. And look, we'd love to see that come to a negotiated settlement. As of right now, the prospects don't look great that either side is prepared to make the concessions necessary in order to reach an agreement. But we stand ready And we've engaged and invested a tremendous amount of high-level time on that conflict over the last year. I think it's a source of frustration for the world. Hopefully this year will bring better news. I don't have any news for you on that front today, but we are ready. As I've expressed to both sides repeatedly, we're ready to step in and play whatever positive role we can to bring that devastating and escalating war to an end.
Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. And just let me say, Claire and Sebastian Lai and all of us are deeply grateful to you and the president for everything you tried to do to get Jimmy Lai out. Obviously, it's an ongoing concern, and I know you will continue to push for that. But I know you did everything. The ball was in Xi Jinping's court, and he unfortunately erred on the side of continued incarceration of that great human rights defender. But thank you for that. Let me say on the Iran deal, I remember sitting right here and on the floor of the House talking about how egregiously flawed the deal was 10 years ago when the Ayatollah was able to get the language dealing with ballistic missiles out of it because he said it would be stupid, his words, and then they built ballistic missiles like never before. On them never having, Iran never having a nuclear weapon, let's not forget that the agreement was in effect until October of this past year. Other nations were still a part of it, and yet they were building a capacity to create nuclear weapons and to use them. And the MAD theory does not apply to them, as we all know. Unlike Russia, Soviet Union in the past, even China, they don't want to be destroyed. With the Iranians, there's this sense of martyrdom that I think is perverse. And so they are not guided by a mutual assured destruction theory that holds both sides in check. Let me just say too on the Nigeria, thank you for what you've done there with not just CPC, but the most recent taking out of some of the worst terrorists who are slaughtering Christians, and the numbers continue. But I know you're engaging very, very aggressively there. On the DRC-Rwanda conflict, thank you for sanctioning some of the top people who are committing atrocities. And that just happened a couple of days ago, yesterday, for sure. That shows that commitment there. And on even the Armenian-Azerbaijan, I've been working on Nagorno-Karabakh, Azerbaijan and Armenia for 30 years. They often called Nagorno-Karabakh the frozen conflict because nothing would ever happen. You guys stepped in, and the president stepped in and got a peace treaty. I mean, I've met with Aliyev in Baku on 2 occasions. He was totally unwilling to admit to the human rights abuses that he was engaging in, especially as it relates to Nagorno-Karabakh and the Armenians. You've come up with a solution. Thank you for that. And anything you want to speak to on the DRC, Rwandan, or any of these issues, appreciate everything you're doing for this country. There's a full plate of horrible things happening, and we're so grateful you're at the helm. Please.
Oh, well, I just on DRC Rwanda, I would say, because just to elaborate on that a little further, as you know, we had an agreement signed and the compliance was not good in that regard. But to be fair, and I know that some other people disagree with this assessment, but we believe it's pretty accurate on the Rwandan side. And so we initiated some sanctions, targeted sanctions on Rwanda. They've come to the table. They've made some commitments. They are complying with the commitments, maybe not at the rate or speed that we'd like them to, but there's been some compliance on pulling back of troops. What we'll watch very closely, of course, is we don't want to see Rwandan troops change uniform into M23 uniforms and claim that they've pulled out. We got to watch that very carefully. And we also have to deal with the M23 issue there. But those are both DRC, Rwanda, and Sudan are 2 areas we remain very engaged in trying to find a solution to.
Representative's time has expired. Representative Castro, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming in today and for your testimony. I want to start with Iran. I'm hopeful that the president and the administration are able to reach an agreement that ends the war and also reopens the Strait of Hormuz. If there's a deal subject to congressional review under INARA, I'll approach it with a fair mind, and I hope that all of us will as well. I just ask that you keep the committee briefed on the details of that agreement, and I believe that it's in America's interest that this war end, and I sincerely mean that. We are at war alongside Israel against Iran. Iran has struck Israeli nuclear facilities at Dimona, and American service members are deployed throughout the region, as you know. Congress needs to understand the full risks of the conflict, including the nuclear risks. On May 4th, I wrote to you with 29 colleagues asking for details about these risks and Israeli nuclear weapons. On June 1st, your Bureau of Legislative Affairs responded and said, quote, "We refer you to the government of Israel for your questions about Israel's capabilities." I have to say, Mr. Secretary, that's a very bizarre response. 30 of us wrote to you and to the State Department asking our government for an answer, an assessment about a foreign nation's nuclear capabilities. In your opening statement, you referred to India and Pakistan as nuclear nations. We've also spoken in different sessions, both in closed and open sessions, you know, as a U.S. Senator, former U.S. Senator, about the nuclear capabilities of other nations, Iran, China, Russia, France, the UK, both adversaries and allies. And so I wanted to ask you the question today, will you tell us, the Congress and the American people, whether Israel in fact possesses nuclear weapons?
You know that's a question that they've never acknowledged to have a nuclear program. People can have, as you know, an open source and other reporting suspicions about what they possess. If we're speaking frankly, I think most of the world assesses that they do, but they've never acknowledged that publicly, and as a feature of our foreign policy for a variety of reasons, we don't discuss it in that way either.
Well, I guess a few things. This is the first time, especially for an extended period, that we are at war with an ally, Israel, against Iran. And we have service members deployed. And we don't, if they in fact possess nuclear weapons, and you're right, in open source reporting that has come across, we don't know what their red lines are for using those nuclear weapons. And so I guess I'm shocked that our government wouldn't make an effort to know, to understand, and then to give our oversight body the information that we need to make decisions about the war as well.
That's a fair observation, and I would answer that if perhaps you make that request and you're open to it being answered in a different setting other than a public
Classified setting? A classified setting?
Yes, and both classified and sensitive. And if we could, I think you would get a better response to your question if the context in which it was answered were framed differently than a public letter for a variety of reasons. If we're being mature and grown up here, I mean, foreign policy, and I know that you are, and you, from the tone of your question, it's clear that it's a serious question. These things require delicate balancing acts between different equities, but I think you can get probably a more fulsome answer if we were to be able to respond to that inquiry in a different context, if that makes sense.
Mr. Secretary, I'll certainly take you up on that, and I appreciate your answer. Thank you for that. I have another question on Lebanon. The president and you are working to end this war with Iran, and according to reporting at least, one of the main sticking points is Israel's continuing military campaign in Lebanon against Hezbollah, which the president has called on Israel to stop. The president confirmed last night, in fact, that he in fact told Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to stop the war in Lebanon. My worry is that Israel's insistence on continuing this war against Hezbollah will jeopardize the president's efforts and the American government's efforts to reach an agreement with Iran. And so my question is, do you agree that Israel should stop its military campaign in Lebanon and support the president's negotiations for a peace agreement with Iran?
I'd love to answer that question. It's going to take more than the 42 seconds, and I know I've seen already that people get pretty pissed off here when their time gets eaten up. But if I can answer that question, maybe the next person will let me continue, because that's a really important question. So let me just start by saying this. Let me walk you through this. We had an agreement. Hezbollah reached out 2 weeks ago and basically said, about 10 days ago, and basically said, we will not launch missiles into Israeli territory if they stop attacking into Beirut. That was the agreement, I think 5 p.m. 2 Saturdays ago. At 6 p.m., they launched missiles. And then they came back and said, well, we made a mistake. We thought it started tomorrow, not Saturday. Then they went again and violated it again on Sunday.
But also Israel has been bombing and launching throughout. Is that correct?
Well, there's two separate things. Actually, Israel has not conducted massive operations in Beirut for some time. What you see them operating is in the south. And what they are, what we've always said, and it's part of the joint statement, we've always said is Israel has a right to act in its defense. So as an example.
Well, but so then why did the president have to tell Israel to stop
Time has
anything?
expired. Representative Wilson's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Indeed, Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you and recognize that we appreciate the U.S.-Israel alliance, and we appreciate very much the response that's being done against 1,100 missile attacks that have come out of Lebanon, as you've just identified correctly, and they need to know that, and how they don't know that, I don't know. But any attacks that are done by Israel are in response, not initiated. With that in mind, you are serving at a historic time with success of dictators on the run. Dictator Assad of Syria has fled to Moscow. Dictator Maduro of Venezuela is incarcerated in Manhattan. Dictator Khomeini of Iran has been eliminated, joining the 40,000 Iranians he murdered this year. as chairman myself of the Helsinki Commission for Security and Cooperation in Europe, you have achieved unprecedented unity in Latin America, supporting the liberation of Venezuela and soon Cuba. You have achieved historic unity across the Middle East of all countries, supporting American efforts, except for the Republic of Georgia, to oppose Iran and its nuclear capabilities. And in Europe, NATO and the EU are united as never before, promoting defense increases for peace through strength to indeed promote Ukraine victory over war criminal Putin. With that in mind, another region is the South Caucasus, which is critical of the opportunity for the Trump route that you've achieved with Prime Minister Pashinyan of Armenia and President Aliyev of Azerbaijan. What a great achievement that is. With that in mind, though, the pro-Iranian regime and the Chinese Communist Party supported Georgian Dream government, which is illegitimate, threatens American access. There was a rigged election in Georgia. With that in mind, they're facilitating the Islamic Revolutionary Guard and evading sanctions to Tehran. What do you believe should be done to address the rapidly expanding radicalization promoted by the Georgian Dream government in the Republic of Georgia?
Let me, if I may, I want to answer the Georgia question.
You
Can I
all the
steal
above.
30 seconds of your time to finish the answer to
all the
Representative
above.
Castro? So on Georgia, you're right. Everything you just outlined is our pre-existing concern. Since that time, they have made some steps indicating to us that they want to improve their relations with the United States. We've outlined to them what that would take and what that would require. We've received some positive responses. And so our hope is that we can see a change of trajectory in the case of Georgia from where it is today. We obviously understand all the things you just laid out as being pre-existing problems for us. They've asked us, what will it take to have a better relationship with the United States? We've responded, and hopefully we can build on that basis and perhaps change the trajectory, not just of our relationship with Georgia, but of their behavior. Is it okay if I just take 30 seconds of your time? I apologize. So on the strikes that you're referring to, here's what happens in the South. I'm just going to speak colloquially as best I can. The Israelis see Hezbollah moving around, maybe even launching a missile from the south, and they action it in defense. They go after it in the southern portion. And that's what we're seeing in many cases is these defensive strikes. What they're increasingly doing is taking more territory in the south to deny them launching space. Because understand, these rockets are being launched into northern villages and cities in Israel, and populations can't even return to their homes as a result of it. In the case of what happened the other day, the following was happening. We had indications, multiple indications, that Israel may be considering conducting anti-Hezbollah strikes inside of Beirut. And at that moment, we had reach out from the Lebanese authorities saying that Hezbollah had contacted them and said, if Israel doesn't strike Beirut, that they would stop launching missiles into Israeli territory. That's the message we got, and that's what the president pursued and said, okay, I had this outreach. If you won't do these strikes in Beirut, they'll stop launching against you in northern Israel. Unfortunately, within an hour or two of that conversation, they launched 2 waves of rockets from Hezbollah against Israel in Israeli territory. So it's an ongoing challenge. I think one of the reasons why we're engaged in these talks between Lebanon and Israel is understanding that Hezbollah is not just an enemy of Israel. Hezbollah is an enemy of Lebanon. They are an enemy of the Lebanese government. They have called for the overthrow of the Lebanese government. When Lebanon expelled the Iranian ambassador, he refused to leave. He said, I'm not leaving. You can't expel me. Hezbollah is protecting me. So Hezbollah is not just a challenge to Israel. It's a challenge to Lebanon, to the Lebanese state and the Lebanese people. And we are hopeful that we can create a paradigm in which Lebanon's government and Israel can work together to disarm Hezbollah and allow the people of Lebanon to reclaim its country. But it's complex. This has been going on since OJ had isotoners in those commercials. So.
And Mr. Secretary, you're correct. I was with President Aoun in Beirut last year, and that what you're doing is should address it. I do want to point out, give Syria a chance, and that's been your success, Tom Barrack, the president, giving Syria a chance. We need to delist Syria from the state sponsor of terrorism, and I urge that to be done.
Thank you for being so generous for Representative Castro's question. Representative Titus is recognized.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I just want to talk about some of the conflicting comments that we've been hearing about the status of Iran's military. The president just made some comments on Fox News where he said Iran's military we sort of left it alone because we think that their military is somewhat moderate. We've taken different forms of leadership out, but we've actually left their military alone. People would be surprised to hear that. Well, I'm very surprised to hear it because we've had Secretary Hegseth say repeatedly that Epic Fury decimated Iran's military and rendered it combat ineffective for years to come. You've said the Iranian Navy's at the bottom of the sea and they have no Air Force either. Well, which is it? You're the Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor. If you can't tell us if the military's decimated or not, is it at the bottom of the sea? Was it left alone? This is a major point I think Congress needs clarity on.
Okay, thank you. Fair question. Let me address both of them. The first is on the military. I think there's a difference between the military's hardware and capabilities and the individuals involved in the military. As you know, the Iranians suffered tremendous losses in personnel, and that includes top leadership of the IRGC and other elements of their government. What the president is alluding to is that there are certain individuals in the Iranian regime who have indicated both directly and indirectly a willingness to approach the future perhaps a little different. Not ideal. I'm not telling you, look, everybody talks about moderates in Iran. There are no moderates. There are radicals and super radicals, okay? That's been our view of it. But there are some of them that believe that they actually need to do a deal because their economy is in shambles. And so I think what the president is alluding to is that there are some individuals involved in the negotiations and in elements of their government, including some in elements of their military that are more open to a deal than other. As far as the Navy is concerned, yeah, they have no Navy. What they have remaining is a bunch of small crafts, I would call them Boston whalers with machine guns. And these things are harassing ships. And these are the ones that go after, in some cases, they drop mines off the back of them, or they try to harass shipping with swarms. They are unable to form swarms the way they once did. They are primarily now threatening shipping through the use of one-way attack drones. But their Navy, what you would consider a Navy with naval vessels that can actually conduct naval operations, is non-existent at this point.
So is the war still on or is the war off?
Well, Epic Fury has concluded. What you're seeing reports of, including last night, is the following. A ship will go through the route, particularly both the northern and southern route of Hormuz. Those ships will come under attack. The U.S. will respond to that attack by shooting down those drones that are trying to sink a commercial civilian vessel illegally and unlawfully. At that point, the Iranians will respond to that by targeting some facility in the region in retribution. On occasion, in order to protect our own forces, we don't just strike the drones, we strike the people who launch those drones. These are completely defensive in nature, and but they are happening in response to an Iranian action. If they don't shoot at those ships, we don't shoot. But we have to respond. You have a civilian commercial vessel transiting the straits, and they're being targeted by drones, and these drones are not like highly precise. They could hit any part of that ship and they could create, including an ecological disaster.
Well, apparently some kind of military exists that's shooting these drones off. I mean, the military obviously isn't decimated.
Well,
they're attack these ships with these drones.
Yeah, they still retain a drone.
When you say what the president was alluding to, the president's not a person who's known for illusions. He just shouts it right out, whatever he's thinking. So I don't think he was alluding to anything, as you suggest.
Well, drones are, as you know, a challenge in multiple battlefields around the world. It's going to be a tremendous challenge for warfighting in the future because they're cheap.
Yeah, I know what drones are.
I know you know what they are, but I'm saying that they're cheap and they're easy.
Yes, I know, and we're using things that are very expensive to shoot them down.
And that needs to change. That said, yes, they still have the capability to, they can't launch as many as they used to, and they can't launch them in the swarms they used to launch them in, but they still retain that capability.
Okay. Well, let me just ask you a quick question about something that Ambassador Barrack said, changing the subject a little bit. He compared Israel to Hezbollah, for one thing. That was a pretty concerning comparison. But also he said Turkey should join the F-35 program. These comments are inconsistent with law and long-standing policy, and I'm just wondering what your position is as Secretary of State. Can Turkey get F-15s and F-35s, or not? What if we seem to be helping the bad guys and not the good guys?
Well, as I'm sure you're aware, Turkey actually was in the F-35 program. The reason why they can't get them is because they purchased the S-400 system from the Russians.
They still have those. And they're still under mandatory sanctions because
correct.
of
So as you know, that's governed by statute.
Okay, or not?
Well, right now we don't have that choice because it's governed by statute, both provisions of the NDAA and the statute.
Out there saying that.
Representative, time has expired. Representative Perry is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I would give you an opportunity to answer the ranking member, even though he didn't pose it as a question. But I, as an individual, like many on the dais who have served in uniform, thank you for your actions regarding Iran and this administration's action. But if you want to answer it yes or no, you're welcome to. Who started the war between Iran and America 47 years ago?
Yeah, remember, these yes or no things I don't like, but I could just tell you, Iran has been at war against the United States since the minute the Islamic regime took over.
Yeah, and I feel the same way. And again, thank you on behalf and to honor the thousands and 10,000s of Americans who have been murdered or maimed by Iran. Thank you for honoring them. Just moving on to questions, did Pakistan's foreign minister personally deliver a message to you that Iran is prepared to demonstrate a nuclear weapon should the current escalation continue? That's been reported, and I just want to see if I can ferret that out.
I've not seen that reporting, and I'm not aware of any such message.
Okay, and if there were such a message, would that change anything in America's posture, or not only the message, but the action? Would that change anything regarding our goals regarding Iran?
The hypothetical question is, if Iran threatened that they're going to test a nuclear device if talks fail, I think it would confirm everything we believe about them anyways. And I think the president then would have to pursue, or at least have to consider various other options that are available to him in that context. But again, I've not heard that message relayed. I don't know the reporting you're referring to. You're talking about a press report?
Yeah, I am talking about a press report.
I would be surprised if that message had been relayed. I would be aware of it if it was.
I would think so. That's why I'm asking. So that's enough on that. I know that the president, look, he's an America First guy. He's concerned about every single American citizen, regardless of their party affiliation or their ideology and affordability. The president is concerned about those things. And I shudder to think what Iran would do if they could, armed with nuclear capability and ballistic missile capability, coupled with that, seeing what they're doing right now, extorting the world economy without those things. So with that in mind, it's been reported that the UAE is building a pipeline to the Gulf of Oman, which would bypass the Strait of Hormuz, essentially doubling their capacity, which would, of course, lower the price and the risk of global fuel transport or oil transport. Do you understand, or do you recognize and know what the timeline for a proposed timeline for completion of that pipeline is?
Yeah, I'm aware of those efforts. They actually pre-exist the conflict in terms of a desire to do so. These things, I can't tell you specifically. I'm not a pipeline building expert,
right,
but I can tell you certainly it's going to take more than a week or a year. I mean, these are complex. I think the broader point, which your question touches on, is I do think you're going to see a reshifting of where the world gets its energy from in the aftermath of this conflict. You're already beginning to see some of it now. I think you're going to see the United States be a bigger energy provider to the Indo-Pacific. We have the capability to do so, but it's going to take some time to build that capability. So I think you're going to see more of that. And I think you're going to see the establishment of more of these alternative routes as a result of this. Remember, only about 20% of global oil goes through the Straits of Hormuz, but it is about 80 to 85% of the oil that goes to the Indo-Pacific. So in those particular countries, I think you're going to most definitely see them buying more from other places, including the United States.
And that's going to lower the cost for everybody, which is great. Secretary, just moving on, you're of Cuban descent, of Colombian descent. Can you describe, and Cuba has been a sore...
Are you really Colombian? I didn't know that.
Yes,
oh, wow.
Indeed. But Cuba has been sowing the seeds of discord in our hemisphere, inviting China, Russia, North Korea, all manner of communist, oligarch, bad actors into the hemisphere. What, if you could describe, generally speaking, what the policy where we're headed with Cuba as the United States of America? Where are we headed, and what do you envision being success, and how do we measure that?
In 56 seconds, I will tell you what we want for the people of Cuba is to be able to live in a normal country.
You're here.
I want them to live in a country that looks like the Dominican Republic, like Jamaica, like the Bahamas, like any of these other places where people can own their own business, people can vote for their own leaders. By the way, that's not my desire. That's the policy of the United States. That's enshrined in statute. Here's the problem, and we're willing to do this through a diplomatic means. The problem we have is that country's not controlled by a government. That country's controlled by a military conglomerate that basically controls 70% of the nation's GDP, and none of the profits of that conglomerate goes into the public treasury. None of that money goes to build bridges and roads or to reinvest into their energy infrastructure. All of it goes to build more hotels for tourists that aren't coming and to line the pockets of the people that are involved. So that has to change. My question, I think we all can envision what we want Cuba to look like, and it doesn't have to happen from overnight. Okay, we understand they're not going to go from being what they are now to turning into Belgium or Switzerland in one day to the next. It takes time in these processes. I just don't believe, frankly, at this point, given everything we've seen, that the people in charge of that conglomerate and of that government are capable of making these reforms, at least not yet. Their mindset isn't there. Their incentives aren't there. They have spent, 60-something years waiting us out and holding on. And I think they can still get away with it, and they can't, and they won't be able to.
Time has expired. Representative Liu is recognized.
Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here today. You have been at multiple meetings with President Trump. In a moment, I'm going to show you a video of one of these meetings. It is from last December. It's a cabinet meeting. I'm going to ask you to focus on President Trump, and you will see that he is sleeping while you're talking.
Oh, my God.
Please show the video.
Products they make and what American farmers grow and produce has a fair shot to be sold around the world. On issue after issue, that's been the case. You talk about foreign aid reforms. This is not our money. This is taxpayer money.
Secretary Rubio, have you been at more than one meeting where President Trump has fallen asleep?
That's false. That's false. I've never seen him fall asleep. On the contrary, the guy doesn't sleep, which is a big problem because he calls me at 2 in the morning. He calls me at 5 in the morning. And, I like to sleep a little bit, maybe not 12 hours, but at least 6. So he works. The other day he was at the Oval Office until 12:30 p.m. 12:30 a.m. I don't know what you're talking about.
Secretary Rubio, I'm going to show you in a moment a video that shows you just lied to Congress.
Oh, okay.
So this is a video of a cabinet meeting literally from last month where Donald Trump is sleeping while you're talking. Please show this video.
Coalition of countries that line up behind the peace deal, behind the border peace, and it's still every day is a challenge, but it's been driven personally by the president. It's the reason why we're involved in this whole Ukraine-Russia conflict. That's not our war. It's not the president's war. This war started. It never would have happened if you'd been president. But this war is going on, and the president is trying to end it.
You are literally talking about issues of war and peace, and Donald Trump is sleeping right next to you.
No, he's not.
If Donald Trump cannot stay awake at these important meetings where the cameras are rolling, imagine what he's like when the cameras are not there. So I'm going to ask you, have you been at classified meetings where Donald Trump has fallen asleep or had trouble staying awake?
I've never been at any meeting where and the things you're showing me now, he was not falling asleep. And I think
so you're lying again. You're lying consistently to Congress.
About sleep.
You're lying to Congress, Secretary Rubio. So I'm going to show you another video in a moment. The president's inability to stay awake on the job has caused other countries to perceive him differently. They mock him. They see he is weak and he is